see you guys on the next one. And it will be in a shorter time range than 6 months.
Oh, a shorter time range than 6 months, huh? Okay, yeah.
So when I left you guys, I was showing you a Peterbilt 359 model that I wanted to take apart and fully rebuild. Somebody once told me that if you throw a plastic model in a freezer, it would make it a lot easier to take and rip the glued parts apart from one another without actually damaging the plastic. I don't know if it's something about the Jimmy Dean sausage grease that helps it happen, but it didn't really work. Some parts were able to come apart a little bit easier than others, but for the most part, they took quite a bit of prying in order to get them apart without completely breaking the model. Unfortunately, some parts, like the wheel axles, got broken when I moved to my new place. But that's okay, we'll make new ones later. When I was taking the model apart, I realized that when I first painted this thing, it was actually painted blue. I think that I had intentions of putting decals on over the black paint, but that never ended up happening. I tried getting the doors off without breaking the hinges. Unfortunately, they broke. So for putting the model back together, I'll have to glue the doors back on, and being able to view inside the cab by opening the doors just isn't going to happen. And here it is, completely apart, with the 3D printed wheels that I'll be using in the rebuild. Now it's time to take this extra long chassis and shorten it. I think I'm going to cut it from here to here, and then I'll have to repurpose some of these cross beams. The initial cuts are going to be kind of sloppy, but I plan on coming back in later and clearing that up with a little bit of sanding. I will be reusing the U-joints, but I'm not going to be reusing the drive shaft. So let's go ahead and set the U-joints to the side. Quick little mock-up just to make sure that I'm okay with the length, and I think I'm pretty satisfied with that. Now let's get rid of some of the excess details that we're not going to need, like these sleeper cab mounts. Goopy paint removal. To connect the two pieces of frame back together, I'm using a little bit of scrap frame material and just gluing it right in. Figured it's the same type of plastic, so it'll probably do a pretty good job of holding it back together. The seams themselves will be hidden under some of the accessories that are going to be getting attached back to the frame, so it shouldn't matter too much. Just got to make sure everything's squared up before we move on to painting it. Some of the steering components broke as well, but it's nothing that we can't fix with a little bit of 0.5mm brass. And here it is, glued back together, a little bit of putty to hide some of the crimes, and then new brass drive shafts underneath. And this is that crossbeam that I cut out earlier. It went back in pretty well. And then this is where we're going to attach the tanks. Since this truck is now a short frame day cab, I'm going to need to make the fuel tanks shorter so that way they can fit on the frame between the fenders and the battery boxes. This is the initial size that I began with, but I ended up shrinking it down just a little bit more. There isn't actually quite enough room for it. I would have liked there to be a little bit more of a gap. We're also going to need to add the fuel filler cap to it, but this spot right here needs to be just a little bit wider so that that fender can fit into there. To get rid of the seams, I mixed a little bit of modeling putty. I believe this one is Tamiya putty with a little bit of model cement. I ended up using the Tamiya cement as well, even though you can see another cement there. That wasn't what I used. And then for the cut lines, I watered it down even more and then used a paintbrush to apply it. I'll sand all of this down in a bit, but first we got to get those holes filled in. I start with a file so that I don't conform to the shape of the putty. Instead, I'm able to conform to the shape of the piece that I'm trying to blend the putty into. And once I'm confident that the surface is flush, I can come back in with the sanding sticks to smooth it out for a better finish. The part that I'm cutting out now is going to be a base plate for where the new filler cap is going to go. Because I shortened the whole entire piece, I have to re-drill the holes where the steps are going to get attached. Now it's time to notch in that hole for the filler cap. Because I'm doing this with a drill press and a drill bit, I have to do incremental holes, and then eventually I can do a long cut to connect all these holes together. But because these parts are so fragile, I don't want to make a mistake of trying to rip through it with a really small drill bit, which is going to end up breaking and possibly messing up the piece that I'm working on, and also breaking a drill bit. So a lot of patience is required in this part, but it's plastic, so it's pretty easy to do. This kit did come with fenders for it, but I wasn't able to find them, so I made some custom ones out of brass. I think they turned out pretty good. I think I had to change the size of them a few times as I was assembling all the rest of the model, but they look pretty good. So it's at this point that I realized I may have lost some footage for the project itself. I didn't find any of my painting and paint prep. I ended up painting the frame first before I got to the cab because the paint that I used on this I knew took a little bit longer to cure. So I wanted to get this part knocked out so that it could cure while I was doing the cab. I wanted to repurpose as much of the original model as I could, so I'm taking the simulated stainless steel headache rack and I'm going to cut it into little squares and use it as the panels that sit between the hitch and the back of the cab on the frame. I definitely could have used a saw for this portion of it, but I didn't want to risk messing it up. I figured I could do much cleaner work if I took just a little bit more time and used a razor blade instead. I'm using a combination of both the blade side as well as the back of the blade to act as a scraper to score out the material in between the panels. The process was definitely tedious, but it enabled me to get much cleaner edges. And then I was able to come back in later and use a sander to cut them down even smaller to make sure they fit exactly how I needed them to. It was really satisfying how cleanly those fit into place. As I mentioned earlier, most all the axles on this ended up getting broken, so I needed to rebuild them, which ended up working out anyways because the 3D printed wheels that I was using wouldn't have worked with the original hubs. So a quick little polystyrene and a little bit of brass, and we were in action. The back of the cab has a little raised lip on it. That's going to need to go so that I can ensure the back of it is perfectly smooth. To make the panel on the back of the cab, I'll cut out a rectangle of polystyrene. The back of 359 cabs aren't flat across the bottom, so I'm going to get rid of unneeded material here. I hand drilled a series of holes to simulate the rivets that would have held this panel on. For the rivets, I just used a little bit of polystyrene rod. The work was definitely tedious, but when you see the final results, I think it looks pretty good. To ensure that all of the rivets were the same height, I used a little strip of polystyrene to act as a level for the snipper. Unfortunately, I lost all of the footage for the rebuild process, including painting, reassembling of all the parts, putting on the decals. But here's the final result. I think it turned out really good, especially for a model that I was considering just throwing in the recycle bin. I hope you guys enjoyed this project as much as I did. This one was a lot of fun. It was really cool to have something a little bit more simple to get me back into the hobby. I did finish the 988F as well, and I'm currently in the process of editing that footage, so hopefully I'll be able to get that video out as soon as I can. I hope you guys take care, and I'll see you guys on the next one.